Cancel and Saturn going retrograde 2026 in Pisces. So yeah, I'm Amani, your holistic karmic astrological life coach, and I'm going to take you on this journey. So Saturn goes retrograde on the 26th of July at 8:57 GMT time until the 10th of December at 11:31 PM GMT time. So if you want the 30-second version, Saturn retrograde 2026 is reminding us that us feeling exhausted, burnt out, isn't failure. It's our body rejecting habits that were never ours to begin with, and the responsibilities that you're holding together may be built out of fear and not purpose, and fear-built responses always collapse, reminding us that we cannot, schedule enlightenment, healing, treating your spiritual and personal development like a project is what is keeping your life empty, right? So ultimately it wants to look at your daily routine and for you to change your daily routine. That's it. If you just wanted the 30-second version, that's it. If you want the 15-minute version, listen on, and then of course if you want the in-depth version, listen on to the whole 90 minutes. So as I said, Saturn retrograde this year at 8:57 PM GMT time, which is 1:37 PM PDT time, 2:57 PM Mountain Time, 3:57 PM Central Time, 4:57 PM Eastern Time, 10:57 PM Central European Time, 2:27 AM on the 27th of July Indian Time, and 6:57 AM on the 27th of July Australian Eastern Time, right? So Saturn retrograde 2026 is ultimately the foundations, the routines, the plans that we have built on water, quicksand, not our own, goals, but on the goals of society and others are about to be tested. So, maybe you've built something, maybe it was a career, maybe it was a belief system, maybe it was a version of yourself that felt solid, reliable, dependable, real and authentic. The version that gets up every morning and, does the work. But, is that really you? Some of you may have been holding it together with discipline, sort of like determination, white knuckling through emotional confusion, maintaining routines that lost their meanings months ago, showing up because that's what you do, because responsibility is your religion, and the alternative is, not showing up, and it can be painful to not show up because you may let people down and they may judge you. Maybe some of you have been dissolving, letting go slowly, the boundaries you set around work, around relationships, around your emotional ability, maybe have been thinning, slowing down. Since Saturn entered Pisces, you've been thinking, wow, really? Are these habits, day-to-day habits, especially when it comes around addictive habits and toxic ways of relating, are they really mine? What do I really want out of my life, So maybe you've called it spiritual growth, maybe you've called it surrender, maybe you've called it, going with it, going with the flow. Some of you have been trying to build a spiritual practice with the same energy that you build spreadsheets, structured, logical, measurable, optimized practices, when spirituality, and higher learning means that you need to work more with your right brain and intuition. And Saturn in Pisces has been gently, and sometimes not so gently, showing you that spirit, that way of going about, trying to be spiritual doesn't work. And as I said, some of you are burnt out, not the kind of tired exhaustion that sleep fixes, the kind that sits in your bones, in your left fibula, which is the Sabian symbology. That's what this degree, right, rules in our human body, but more about that later. So, in the leg that carries you forward when everything in you wants to sit down. Some of you have been teaching, mentoring or parenting from from a place of I know how this works. And Saturn retrograde in Pisces is about to show you what you don't know, not to humiliate you, to deepen you. The teacher who wants you to succeed, to be real, to be authentic, right? So whether your structures, routines, habits are holding you or crumbling, whether your discipline serves you or imprisons you, whether your spiritual life is genuine or performative, Saturn retrograde in Pisces is going to show you what you need to know. So Saturn retrograde 101. So Saturn goes retrograde each year for 137 to 140 days, about 4.5 months of every year. Like all retrogrades, it's an optical illusion. Saturn doesn't literally reverse, but Saturn retrograde, hits differently than Mercury or Venus retrograde, because Saturn controls structure itself, routine itself, habits, the frameworks, the processes, the day-to-day things we do, the rules, the boundaries, the order of systems, of authority, the hierarchies, and responsibilities that hold your life together, or lack of them, right? So think of it like a building inspection. The inspector doesn't demolish anything, tear it down. It identifies what's sound and what needs attention, right? Saturn retrograde is the inspector, methodical, thorough, impersonal, and ultimately protective, right? So what is different between Saturn retrograde and Saturn direct, right? So Saturn direct, structure builds outward, boundaries firm up, authority is exercised externally, responsibilities are met through action and career progress. And Saturn retrograde, the structure, the routine, the work turns inward for review, so boundaries are tested from within, authority is questioned internally. You find yourself thinking about who has power over your life. Do you have power over your life? How can you empower yourself? How do you abuse power? How can you structure your day-to-day life so you can reach your goals, right? Your responsibilities are meant to be re-evaluated, rethought, and maybe career progress can, pause during this time for you to rethink about, is your career, because Saturn rules Capricorn 10th house stuff, your public life, going in the right direction. So the key is Saturn direct builds the building, and Saturn retrograde expects the building, right? Looks at the structures, the day-to-day habits. Are they helping you reach your goals, or are they stopping you from reaching your goals, right? So as I said, Saturn retrograde this year on the 26th of July 2026 at 8:57 p.m. British Summer Time in the 21st degrees of Pisces. So Saturn in Pisces is in detriment, it's uncomfortable here, and that discomfort is by design. Saturn wants rules, edges, and something solid to stand on, routines. Pisces, it doesn't do solid, it does flow, right? It feels, it shapes. So you've got the planet of cold, hard reality dropped into a sign that lives in the emotional deep, and Saturn's fighting to build walls, routines in water, in emotions, and that's your detriment right there, right? That's the conflict, right? Then that Sakra, 21st degree of Pisces is Bhadrapada 2, which is a Mercury ruled Sakra, and the deity is Pusan, the nourisher, the god, guide of souls, the protector of travelers, and the Namvasa is Capricorn Saturn. So it's good here, it's got the double Saturn energy, and I'm going to go into depth what all that means. And the Sabian symbology is a white lamb, a child, and a Chinese servant, and as I said, it rules the left fibular muscle in the human body, and it goes direct on the 10th of December 2026 at 11:31 GMT time. And there's a few aspects Saturn's making at the time it goes retrograde this year, right? It's making a square to Mercury, a quintile to Pluto, a quintile to Juno, a conjunction to Pallas, a semi-square to the moon's north node, and a sexti-square to the moon's south node. And don't worry, I'm going to go into details in about 30 minutes about what all that adds to it. There's two T-squares between Mars, Ceres, Venus, and Black Moon Lilith at a 15 degree orb tightness, and Pluto, Juno, Chiron, the Sun, Jupiter and Hygeia at a 25% orb tightness, and then we've got a 3 grand trines between the Moon, Chiron, the South Node, which is a fire grand trine. Then we've got the Sun, Jupiter and Hygeia, the Midhaven, Neptune, the water grand trine, and then we've got another grand trine between Chiron, Vista, the South Node and Black Moon Lilith at 38%, and then we've got a yard between Moon, Uranus, the Sun, Jupiter, Hygeia, the Midhaven and Neptune, right? And then we've got a stellium between the Sun, Jupiter, Hygeia and Cancer, so there's a lot going on in planet terms. And then we've got another stellium between Pluto, Juno, the ascendant in Capricorn as well. So also, we've got Pluto in retrograde, and Pluto went retrograde on the 6th of May. Neptune is in retrograde from the 7th of July, so earlier this month. Mercury is just stationed direct out of its second retrograde this year, and the full retrograde cycle lasts 329 days. The shadow period started on the 20th of April 2026, and that was the pre-shadow, right? And Saturn leaves the post-shadow period on the 15th of March 2027, even though it goes direct on the 10th of December, right? So ultimately, Saturn in astrology is the planet of structure, discipline, time, karma, the consequences of your actions returning to you, responsibility, and the hard lessons that make you who you really are. And, it stopped moving forward. While it appears that way, it's moving side to side, right? In the sign, Pisces, that has no edges, no structure. It's all about flow and mutability. Pisces is mutable, changeable, flexible energy. So let that sit with you for a minute, right? The great builder has to stay in the great dissolver's home, the sign that wants us to let go, to face our addictive behaviors, thoughts, to unnumb ourselves, right? To question our substance abuse, right? To, go higher, go beyond our day-to-day routine, right? So, 10th house is earth energy, solid, practical actions, whereas Pisces is about the things we can't see and things we can't really touch, but we know that's there, like our psychological, emotional and spiritual wounds and trauma. Like, we know they're there, we feel them, they manifest into Saturn's realm by our day-to-day habits that can be self-destructive, right? But ultimately, Pisces energy, we can't see it. So Saturn entered Pisces a while ago, right? And it's been trying to build walls in water, create foundations on fog, and impose discipline on disciplineness, right? Which can be hard to do, So some of that work has been good, spiritual practices that actually hold up under pressure have been created by some of you, boundaries that protect you without making you too rigid and inflexible, structures, routines and habits that serve the soul rather than imprisoning it, right? You've probably created some of those, and some of that work has been, good, but some of it has been futile. You're trying to control what can only be surrendered to, trying to measure what can only be felt, trying to schedule enlightenment, the experience of suddenly understanding something deep and profound, which, it just comes in its own timing. Now, Saturn retrograde, and everything is built in Pisces, since April when the pre-shadow began, it gets submerged for testing. It's Saturn in Pisces retrograde saying, are those things you've been changing actually real, or have you just been speaking it without doing it? What was built on genuine spiritual discipline will hold. What was built on fear disguised as responsibility will fade away. The water will dissolve it. And 3 days ago, Mercury stationed direct in Gemini, on the 23rd of July, and your mind has just resumed some forward motion, even though, Mercury still in its post-shadow period, so we're still kind of in that retrograde flow, but it's going direct after 3 weeks of emotional review, rethinking. And Saturn in retrograde takes over the baton, right? The communication review is complete, the structure review begins about our day-to-day habits. Are they really serving us? And maybe you have figured out what you think, right? But now you find out what you've built, what you've been doing. So ultimately, the upside of Saturn retrograde is the most powerful transit for structure integrity testing. Checking whether what you built, is genuinely solid. Whatever survives Saturn retrograde can be trusted, your career habits and foundations, relationships, spiritual practices, personal boundaries, anything still standing in December was built right, and that knowledge alone is worth 137 days of discomfort while Saturn's retrograde, right? But the challenge is that, structures, routines and habits will crumble. Not all of them, but the ones built on fear, obligation or inherited expectations rather than your own genuine purpose. A lot of the time we're living life for others and not for ourselves, right? In a negative way that's actually toxic to our well-being. Maybe your career path looked right, but now it feels wrong. Relationships hold together by duty rather than love, so they're cracks. Your sense of authority over yourself and others get questioned from the inside out. So the best use of this energy is to review everything you're responsible for: career, finances, relationships, health practices, spiritual commitments, and ask, is this structure, this routine still serving its purpose? If yes, reinforce it. If no, plan the restructure. Don't demolish during retrograde, assess, then act after the 10th of December when Saturn goes direct, right? So, as I said, when Saturn goes retrograde this year, there's already a few planets in retrograde, right? So I'm going to talk a bit about these planets. So we've got Pluto retrograde, that's 18 days into its retrograde period, right? It's been retrograde for nearly 3 months, and it's wanting us to question and transform how we use our power, and Saturn going retrograde is supporting Pluto's retrograde, right? So, it shows us that anything that we change, restructure during retrograde has transformative potential beyond simple maintenance, simple change, right? The changes we make now will have some deep impact, and for us to think out of the box with unconventional creative solutions, because Pluto is making a quintile to Saturn as it goes retrograde, right? And this will influence the whole retrograde period. Then we've got Neptune retrograde, which is 19 days in the same sign of Saturn, right? Both of these, turning inward in the sign of letting go, right? So, both of them are supporting us getting in touch with our emotions in a structured way, get in touch with our inner spirituality. And Mercury going direct, allows us to translate our thoughts into day-to-day habits and foundations, right? And whatever insight Mercury retrograde delivered is going to be challenged during Saturn's retrograde to make sure that we're actually, changing the right things with our communication and the way we think correctly, right? And Uranus is in its pre-shadow period. It's retrograding in 46 days, right? On the 10th of September, and it's allowing us to change the way that we express ourselves, right? So at the moment it's in its pre-shadow phase. We're just thinking about how we can get more effective, but Uranus is going to bring those unexpected events as it goes retrograde in September, right? And we've also got Venus going retrograde on the 3rd of October, Mercury going retrograde again on the 24th of October, and then we've got Jupiter going retrograde on the 13th of December this year, right? So by October 2026, 6 planets will be retrograding at the same time: Pluto, Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, Venus and Mercury. So the second half of 2026 is defined by a collective review at every level of our experience, right? Pluto, our transformation; Neptune, our spirituality; Saturn, our day-to-day habits; Uranus, our authentic self-expression; Venus, our inner values and how we receive and accept love and see beauty in ourselves and others; and and Mercury, how we think and communicate, right? So now I'm just going to talk about the Vedic layer in more detail. So Saturn is retrograding in Revati Pada 2. So, you know, it's a pause before karmic review deepens to its maximum restrictive potency as, you know, Saturn retrogrades through Pisces. It's in the Anarctic zone at 21 degrees of Pisces, so it's approaching the 29th degree crisis change range. So, you know, it's an unfinished business with letting go. It's a last chance to integrate as we go into, you know, as Saturn goes direct in December, and it starts, you know, moving into Aries, right? But before that, it has to get to the 29th degree of Pisces. So it's also in Baladi Avastra, so it's in Elder energy, which is the 18th to 24th degree of any even sign, which Pisces is 12th house, right? So its surface strength is diminished, you know, not strong, but wisdom is accumulated, and it gives us teaching through limitations. So we may experience limitations, restrictions, you know, in our day-to-day routine, but it's teaching us how to sort of like work through obstacles, right? And Saturn's in its own Anvasa, Capricorn, Saturn's own sign. So discipline of structure with letting go is being supported through authority with surrender. So gaining authority by giving up control, right? And as I said, it's in the 12th house, which is collective loss, freedom, institutions of transcendence like hospitals, prisons, monasteries, hidden karma, hidden secret enemies, and, you know, the habits that destroy us that we hide, you know. And the deity is Pusan, the novicer, the guide of souls. So Pusan is the gentle shepherd god who guides souls on their journey, protects travellers and novices, flux, right? And his Sakti power is Kasidayapani. It means the power to nourish, to nurture, not through force but through guidance. He doesn't push souls forwards, he accompanies them, you know, goes with them, guides them, shows them the way, ensures they don't get lost between the worlds. And Saturn, the planet of discipline, karma, limitation, going retrograde in Pusan's Natsakra means the cosmic disciplinarian becomes the shepherd, the judge becomes the guide, the restriction becomes protection on a journey you didn't know you were taken, right? And in Pada 2, the Capricorn Anvasa, which is ruled by Saturn, through Saturn's own Anvasa, Capricorn, as I said, and then that Sakra ruler is Mercury, so this is double Saturn energy, structure within dissolution, letting go, discipline within transcendence, going beyond, right? Going beyond obstacles, form held at the very edge of formlessness, right? And the Sabian symbol, the little white lamb, the child and the Chinese servant, shows this innocence represented by the lamb, this newness represented by the child, and service represented by the servant imagery, right? All protected, guided and structured, even in Pisces dissolving waters. And this is Saturn's gift in Pisces, right? You can dissolve and have boundaries, you can transcend and have structure. The shepherd doesn't leave the flock to find enlightenment, he guides the flock towards it, right? And the left fibular muscle, you know, the body part that Saturn's ruled, is supported, you know, structure on the non-dominant side, the right brain, Pisces, the emotional side, right? You don't notice it until it fails, but it's holding you this whole time, and that's Saturn in Revati Pada 2, right? So as Saturn stops at the 21st degrees of Pisces on the 26th of July, the planet that already moves slowly, it takes 27.5 years to orbit, right? The whole zodiac, it becomes nearly motionless, and this is peak Saturn concentration, restriction, slow to stillness, discipline examined from the inside, the cage inside of you, and karma frozen so you can see its structure, how it's made, you know, the ins and out, how it works, right? So the Vidrida Avasta, the elder state, means that wisdom peaks even though the strength can diminish. So this just means that, you know, yes, you may feel kind of weak and burnt out and exhausted, as I said in the introduction, but the wisdom that you can gain by listening to your body and slowing down is high, it peaks, right? The shepherd knows the path, the territory. He's guided souls across the threshold before, right? And the Saturn going retrograde happens in Revati, the last Natsakra's journey's end, and because Saturn is reviewing what completion means, what protection requires at threshold moments, the moments as Saturn's going to start again in the first Natsakra, right? So the paradox is Saturn in Pisces wants boundaries in formlessness, rules in the realm beyond rules. The Capricorn Namvasa, Saturn's own sign, makes this possible. It's the container, the space for transcendence, going beyond limitations, making new daily habits, right? Starting small, 1%, doing 1% more each day. A lot of the time we don't reach our goals, and this is like what I realised, because we try to do too much instead of breaking it down. It's so much better to do something for 5 minutes a day rather than do something for like 2 weeks per year and never do it again, right? Compound interest, building on your daily habits, right? So the guide Pusan, who doesn't let souls dissolve into nothing, holds the formless experience, right? And Saturn retrograde wants us to look at the way structure, routines, living up to others' expectations or our day-to-day habits, right, have become a prison instead of protection, right? Where discipline has become cruelty instead of guidance, where we have punished ourselves living in fear and all of that, and imprisoning ourselves, and where your boundaries have kept you from letting go what you need to let go of and end, right? So ultimately, as Saturn moves from the 21st to the 13th degree of Pisces through Vavati into Uttara Bhadrapada, the 26th Natsakra, institutions of care can get reviewed: hospital, prisons, monasteries, addiction centres, elder care, all Pisces 12th house domains, right? Saturn asks, is this nourishing, Pusan, or just containing, imprisoning, right? Looking at your self-destructive habits, your relationships and all of that on the personal level. Spiritual discipline will get examined, your meditation practice or any other spiritual practice, your sobriety or lack of it. Are you sober, or do you overindulge in drugs, alcohol or anything else that's intoxicating and leaves you in detriment in terms of your physical, emotional, spiritual and psychological well-being? It's asking, do your daily habits serve your, meeting your goals and letting go, or prevent it, right? End of life questions can come up. You may work on wills, hospice, grief work and ancestor honouring or healing. Vavati, the last Natsakra, means Saturn reviews how you complete, how you guide souls, including your own, across the thresholds from the material, the day-to-day practical 10th house Saturn, right, to the ethereal, the 12th house, the spiritual Pisces Saturn, right? So as I said, this degree rules the left fibula, and the non-dominant side support structures, routines and habits often fail to get attention because they're not dominant. There's things that we depend that will be there. We think our legs or any part of our body that we've always had is always going to be there. We take our breath for granted until we have breathing problems, right? So you have been leaning on something unconsciously, and Saturn's retrograde reveals it by removing it temporarily. So, you may lose access to things that you took for granted, and the lesson here is to realise, to respect and honour, both the conscious and unconscious, right? The small things in life and the big things in life. And we can also have collective karma with endings, so our nations can revisit how we end things, relationship, projects, lives, and Pusan asks, are we guiding these transitions or just abandoning them, right? So as I said, Pusan doesn't force souls forward. He waits when they need to rest, protects when they're vulnerable, nourishes when they're depleted. And Saturn retrograde in Vavati Pada 2 asks, Can you be disciplined about mercy? Can you have boundaries that protect rather than prevent? Can you guide without controlling the destination, right? And the Sabian's lamb, the child and the servant, so what needs protection during this letting go inward journey of Saturn retrograde in Pisces 2026? Wanting us to be more innocent, use our imagination, be open to new routines and new sides of ourselves, to be humble in the way we serve ourselves and others. Saturn says these are not weaknesses to transcend, whatever your weaknesses may be, they are what makes the journey worth guiding. So, wanting us to honour our psychological and emotional trauma, not by numbing it with drugs and alcohol, running away with distractions, Netflix and chilling, endless scrolling, but to be open to, working with them and seeing them as strengths or making them our strengths. So, pay attention to your moon sign in your chart, your rising sign, because it determines which house Saturn retrogrades for you, and any transits that's going in your personal chart, right? Also your natal Saturn position, and whether any planet of yours are in the 21st degree of any sign, right? So now I'm just going to give guidance for all of the 12 signs, right? So read for your sun, moon and rising if you know them for the fullest picture, right? Saturn retrograde lasts 137 days, and these themes that I'm about to mention will unfold slowly, so patience is Saturn's first lesson, right? So for Aries, Saturn retrogrades through your 12th house of the unconscious, hidden patterns and endings. The disciplinarian has entered your dream world, Aries. That pattern where you charge forward, progress forward greatly, brilliantly, and then crash because you ignored every red flag and warning sign. So Saturn in your 12th house has been trying to teach you about the things you can't see, the unconscious patterns, the hidden fears, the self-sabotage that operates beneath your awareness, and the retrograde, turns up the volume on these hidden lessons. So over the next 137 days, Aries, expect vivid dreams with structural themes, buildings, foundations, walls, old fears about authority or failure coming up, the desire to retreat and recharge, take a rest, to replenish after all that reset, after all that burnout, honour that. Honour the needs of your body, mind and soul. It's not weakness, and you may have encounters, meetings with institutions, hospital, prison, spiritual retreats, or people connected to those that reflect your inner structural patterns. So your homework is to schedule some solitude, some time out, some real solitude, not alone with the phone solitude, but one day a month in silence. Let Saturn's lessons arrive through stillness rather than action, right? For Taurus, Saturn retrogrades through your 11th house of friendships, communities and future visions. Your social structures, routines, habits are being tested, Taurus. Taurus, who in your life are you loyal to out of habit rather than genuine connection? Ask yourself that. And Saturn retrograde in your 11th house reviews every friendship, group membership and social commitment for integrity. Are they true to your needs? Are they true friendships? Are you belonging to groups that support who you authentically are? Are they built on mutual support or mutual convenience? So over the next 137 days, expect friendships being tested. The ones that survive are the real ones. Community roles feeling like a burden, are they still serving you? Ask yourself that. Future plans needing change, and the question you should ask yourself is, are my goals actually mine, or did I adopt them because my social circle expected me to? So your homework is have an honest conversation with 3 of your closest friends, or your closest friend, about what you actually need from each other, not what you have been performing, what you actually need. Getting true to, is this friendship meeting your needs, my needs, whatever. For Gemini, Saturn is retrograding through your 10th house of career, authority and public life. Your professional structures, systems are under full review, Gemini. the job you've been holding because it's interesting enough, the career path you've been following because it keeps your options open. Saturn doesn't do interesting enough, Saturn is built to last. So this retrograde asks, is your professional life a genuine structure, system, something you actually like doing, or elaborate arrangement of keeping your options open indefinitely? So over the 137 days Saturn's retrograde, expect career stagnation. You're just feeling like, my career's going nowhere, and that's actually, incubation energy wanting you to slow down and question your and others' authority. Your professional reputation can need maintenance and uncomfortable confrontation with what you actually commit to. If you had to choose one thing to get into the truth, would you really be doing the job you're doing? And I know it can be hard in this economy with money and just having to make ends meet, but ask yourself what you could do to actually do the things in career wise you want to do. Write your career obituary. It's not morbid but clarifying. What would you want said about your professional life, your professional contribution, and the gap between that and your current reality at work is Saturn's curriculum and what it wants you to make a plan to work towards changing in your career over time. Because remember, Saturn's energy is all about slow change but steady, authentic change. For Cancer, Saturn is retrograded through your 9th house of beliefs, higher education and your worldview. So the foundations of your philosophy is being tested, and with the Cancer stellium between the Sun, Jupiter and Hygeia in your 1st house, your identity is growing whilst your beliefs are being reviewed simultaneously. So you're becoming more yourself while questioning everything you thought yourself believed. That's disorientating, right? It can be kind of like confusing, and it's also exactly right what you need to do, right? So expect yourself questioning beliefs that you held since childhood, especially religious or family cultural beliefs or national ones, your educational plans needing change, your travel plans stalling for good reason, and teachers or mentors revealing their limitations. So your homework is identify one belief you've held since childhood that you've never examined. Examine it not to destroy faith but to ensure it's genuinely yours rather than inherited furniture that you've never moved, right? For Leo, Saturn is retrograding through your 8th house of transformation, shared resources and the underworld. Your relationship with power at its deepest level is under review. Leo typically relates to power naturally. It's part of your solar identity, being ruled by the Sun and the 5th house, right, naturally. But the 8th house is about other people's power, shared power, power exchange in intimate settings, and the transformative destruction that precedes rebirth, letting go, newness. So Saturn is asking, what are you willing to destroy in order to be reborn? So you, over the whole period of Saturn retrograde, expect joint financial matters requiring change, insurance or inheritance issues coming up, intimate power dynamics becoming visible and requiring honest renegotiation and confrontation with your own mortality, not literally but psychologically. The awareness that time is finite can come to your attention. So your homework is, have the money conversations you've been avoiding with your partner, your business associate, your family, whoever shares resources with you. Saturn rewards financial honesty during the retrograde, right? So for Virgo, Saturn retrogrades through your 7th house of partnerships. The structures, routines, habits of your one-to-one relationships are being expected, Virgo. So ask yourself, Virgo, what would happen if you stopped trying to fix your partner and started examining the power structure, the relationship itself, not the person, but the framework, the habits you have, the life you've built together, the rules spoken and unspoken, the division of emotional and other spiritual, physical, labour, right, psychological labour, or the work, right, the power dynamics, the expectations in your relationships. Over the next 137 days, expect partnership tension, friction that's actually structural, Remember that the relationship isn't broken, the framework needs updating. Business partnerships require a contract review. Legal matters in relationships may move slowly, and the honest assessment of whether you're in your current relationship because it's right or because leaving feels like a failure. So your homework is, Virgo, to ask your partner to tell you one thing about the relationship, routines and structure, not about you personally. That doesn't work for them. Listen without defending, and also state your needs and listen to the responses as well. So for Libra, Saturn is retrograding through your 7th house of daily routines, work habits and health. Your everyday habits, routines are under microscopic review, Libra. So maybe you've been trying to make your daily life beautiful, functional, balanced and fair, and Saturn retrograde says stop trying to make it perfect and start making it honest. So ask yourself, which routines serve genuine health on all levels: physical, emotional, financial, spiritual and psychological, and which serve aesthetics, beauty, just looking good, situationships sort of thing, just it looks pretty for the gram or other social media, but it's not reality. Ask yourself which work habits produce results and which improve productivity. So, expect health issues demanding attention, especially chronic conditions you've been managing rather than treating, daily schedules needing a complete overhaul, work habits being exposed as inefficient, and the question, am I taking care of myself or performing self-care for our audience? So strip your daily routine to absolute essentials for 1 week. No exaggeration, no aesthetic, just what's necessary. What you miss tells you what matters. What you don't miss is the decoration, right? And for Scorpio, Saturn is retrograding through your 5th house of creativity, romance, self-expression and children. Your creative habits are being tested in deep water, Scorpio, during this whole retrograde period, and the midhaven in your sign is part of the water grand trine. So your career identity, your creative expression and Neptune dissolving spiritual energy are all flowing together right during this retrograde period. So this is powerful creative territory, and Saturn retrograde is asking you, is your creativity structured enough to produce lasting work, or are you having intense creative experiences that never materialize into anything others can encounter? So over Saturn retrograde, expect creative projects stalling for unnecessary revision. Romantic relationships require structural honesty. Children, if you have them, testing your authority, and the confrontation with happiness. Specifically, you asking yourself, is there enough joy in your life? Whether you have structured your life to actually include happiness, or whether intensity has replaced happiness. So your homework is finish something, don't start something new, finish something you abandoned. Saturn in the 5th house rewards completion over inspiration, So for Sagittarius, Saturn is retrograding through your 4th house of home, family and emotional foundations. So the ground beneath your feet is being tested, Sagittarius. So Sag, you've been everywhere, you've explored everything, but Saturn in the 4th house keeps asking the question, would you rather avoid your home? Where is home for you, right? Is it home really? Not philosophically, physically, emotionally, structurally. Where do you land? What feels like home to you? Where do you stay? What foundations, habits have you built that you can actually return to? And the moon in Sagittarius, in your sign, being the yard's focus point, right? Your emotional truth is under fated change, pressure right now, and you may feel the need for building roots, going back to your heritage, to your family practices, right, even as your nature pulls towards new horizons, right? So over the next 137 days, Saturn's retrograde, expect your home habits needing literally repair, how you communicate in the household, your family dynamics requiring honest conversation, the need to nest and to find a home, make a home, fighting with the urge to flee, to leave, to abandon your home, and the confrontation with your deepest emotional pattern, the one about never staying long enough to find out if you actually belong. So your homework, Sagittarius, is to stay put for one full month. Don't travel, don't plan. Travel, just be where you are and who you are. Let the discomfort teach you what home actually means to you. So for Capricorn, your ruler retrogrades through your third house of communication, thinking and local environment. So when your ruling planet retrogrades, you feel it in your bones, because Capricorn literally rules the skeleton system, right? So Saturn retrograde in your first house reviews how you think, how you communicate, and how your daily environment supports or gets in the way of your mental clarity, you seeing things clearly. So, you've also have a stellium in Capricorn between Pluto, Juno and the Ascendant at 38-degree orb tightness. In your first house means your identity, your commitments and your transformation are all concentrated in your sign, whilst your ruler retreats into the waters of Pisces. That's where Saturn, your ruler, is, right? And over the 137 days, Saturn's retrograde, expect communication slowing down, say less, mean more, siblings or neighbours requiring attention, local environment feeling restrictive, and your inner monologue changing from productive discipline to existential questioning. So your homework is edit everything you write to half its length, not just during retrograde, as a permanent practice. Saturn in your third house rewards precision over value. Say exactly what you mean, nothing more. Aquarius, Saturn is retrograding through your second house of money, values and self-worth. The financial and philosophical foundations of your life are under review, Aquarius, and the North Node in your sign adds evolutionary pressure. Your soul's direction requires you to get real about resources. Saturn semi-squaring the Moon's North Node from your second house says the friction, the tension between your evolving purpose and your material structures and habits is exactly where the growth happens. Over 157 days, expect income requiring, restructuring, change, not necessarily decreasing, but changing things, right? Spending patterns revealing unconscious values, self-worth issues coming up around money, and the deep question, do I value what I say I value, or do my spending patterns tell a different story? So your homework is audit your spending against your stated values. Print 3 months of bank statements. Highlight every purchase, does the pattern match who you say you are? So for Pisces, right, Saturn is retrograding in the first house, right, because it's in your sign. Saturn is reviewing the very structure of who you are. Saturn in your first house has been building a more solid version of you, wanting you to be more boundaried, more disciplined, more capable of saying no. The retrograde doesn't undo the work, right? It tests whether the new boundaries are genuinely yours or borrowed from someone else's idea of strong. So with Neptune also retrograde in your sign, both the structure builder and the dissolver are turned inward at the same time. Your identity is being simultaneously solidified and dissolved. This may sound impossible. It's actually the most Piscean process that there is, right? The most Piscean process imaginable, becoming more real by becoming less attached to what real looks like. So expect, identity confusion, and that's actually identity refinement, while Saturn's retrograding, right? Physical appearance or health changing, because the first house affects the body, old versions of yourself coming up for integration, and the fundamental question, who am I when I start performing strength? Look for the answers to that. So your homework is look at photos of yourself from the past, see how much you have changed, not just physically but energetically. The change is real. Saturn retrograde is making sure the change is structural, not cosmetic. Trust the process. So now I'm just going to talk a bit about the energetic frequency of Saturn retrograde more and what this energy actually feels like. So as I said, Saturn in Pisces is one of the most contradictory, paradoxical placements seemingly on the surface, because Saturn builds walls, Pisces dissolves them. Saturn creates structure, Pisces says structure is an illusion. Now making that retrograde, the paradox intensifies the structures, the routines, the habits you've been building, the career processes, relationship boundaries, spiritual disciplines, personal responsibilities. Don't just pause, they get submerged. Imagine building a house and then the river rises. The retrograde doesn't destroy the house, it just covers it, right, with water. So the positive expression is, as I said, it's good for reviewing every routine, structure in your life and determining which ones serve a genuine purpose. Saturn retrograde brings the quality inspector inside. Career paths get stress tested, relationships get honesty tested, spiritual practices get depth tested, right? But the shadow expression is paralysis, the inability to move forward through over-analysis. Reviewing structures, routines, habits become an excuse for not building anything new. The retrograde can trigger an imposter syndrome, the feeling that you're a fraud and everybody is about to find out, authority crisis, questioning whether you have the right to lead or decide, and a collapse of confidence in your own competence, right? The body expression is the left fibular muscle. This degrees body part is the smaller bone of the lower leg and the one that supports the ankle and stabilizes lateral side to side movement. So it's not the main weight bearing bone, that's the tibia. The fibula provides stability, structure and the ability to change direction without collapsing, and your body during Saturn retrograde mirrors the structural review happening psychologically. The stabilizing muscle and bones, the ones that keep you upright and balanced, are under review. So just pay attention to that. So now I'm just going to talk a bit more about what each aspect adds. So at the beginning, the very beginning, right, we're like maybe 45 to 50 minutes in of this 90 minutes conversation we're having together about Saturn retrograde, looking at it from all angles, right? So I said at the beginning that Mercury's making a square to Saturn, and this is at 158 separating. So this is when our thoughts and our routines collide, and this square provides productive friction, and Mercury square Saturn says your thinking has outgrown your habits, so you need to change it, right? And it provides the energy to do so. Saturn's quintile to Pluto is implying at 132, orb strength. So this is the aspect of genius level creative solutions, the answer that comes from a complete unexpected angle, right? So out of the blue. So this aspect says the creative solution to your structural crisis involves transformation, not renovation. You don't fix the old building, you build a new one. So Pluto's Sabian symbol, pheasants displaying on a vast lawn, adds specificity. The transformation involves how you display your authority. The creative change isn't about what you built, it's about how you present what you built, right? Saturn also makes a quintile to Juno at 057 applying. So again, another creative genius aspect. Juno's the planet of committed partnerships, are helping us reevaluate our relationship. This energy says your committed relationships contain a creative solution to any structural crisis and problems you have in them. So looking at the relationship where you came together, even if you decide to end, it's all there, right? And Juno's Sabian symbol, the albatross feeding from the sailor's hand, deepens this, the wilderness of long-term partnership. The albatross flies thousands of miles but always returns, accepting nourishment from the particular person. So in this theme, the albatross, the sailor's hand, so you getting nurturing from your partner. So sometimes we may need to end something, but this aspect is helping us spice up our relationships and rejuvenate them, right? Saturn also makes a semi-square to the moon's north node and a sesqui square to the south node, right, at 128 applying. So these are irritation aspects, like a pebble in our shoe, small but impossible to ignore. So it's saying that our evolutionary direction, our change direction, where our soul needs to head, and our karmic past, which is the south node, right, and where we are heading is the north node, are both slightly but persistently out of alignment with the routines and habits you've built. The pebble in your shoe won't destroy you, but it's like annoying, right? And the north node Sabian symbol of the child born of an exile, and the south node energy of constellations in the sky create a polarity, a pair of opposites. So the emerging new child and the eternal old stars. So it's wanting you to think about what new habits can be built out of the old habits in a nutshell, right? And it supports us doing that. Saturn's conjunction to Pallas at 6:55 separating the asteroid of strategic wisdom, pattern recognition, and the father delta wound. So our strategic mind and our structure authority have recently merged. The wisdom about how to restructure is already available. It came through before the station, right? So it's allowing us to change. It's supporting us and going to show us how to change over the 4.5 months Saturn's retrograde. So we have two quintiles, right? We have two of them within a 2-degree orb. We have Saturn Pluto 1.37 and Saturn Juno 0.57, and this can be unusual, at the time of retrograde, and it speaks to the creative energy hidden inside this retrograde. So quintiles operate outside the major aspect system. They're not harmonious patterns like trines or tense like squares. They're lateral. So Saturn quintiling both Pluto, the planet of transformation, and Juno committing partnership, right, at the same time, means the creative restructuring of your life involves both a transformation of how you use power and a creative renegotiation of your deepest commitments. These two processes are not separate, they are connected. The semi-square, square to the nose adds the irritation factor. These creative solutions aren't comfortable. They require us changing our relationship with both the past and the future, right? So in a nutshell, Saturn retrograde Pisces wants us to learn from the lessons of the past so we can create a better future for ourselves, right? So now I'm going to talk more about the transiting aspect patterns in more depth. So let's talk about the T-square. So the first T-square between Mars and Aries in Taurus, Venus in Leo, and the Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius. So fixed earth and fire, right? So this is the lightest T-square but carries the sharpest energy. Mars, the planet of action, aggression and Aries, the planet of nourishment and mothering in Taurus, are in tension with Venus, the planet of love, beauty and values in Leo, and the Black Moon Lilith, the side feminine, the rays that will suppress in Sagittarius. So what this translates to is how you take action around how you nurture yourself and how you use your resources and look after your resources, your time, your energy. The Mars Aries energy is clashing with what you want to be a mind for, which is Venus in Sagittarius, and the wild unpredictable truth of what you've been hiding, right? Black Moon in Lilith energy. So this energy is helping us to tell the truth, to let out rage, to manage our resources, and to be a bit wild in the way that we let out rage, but do not hurt others with it, but if you need to scream, go for a drive, whatever. If you just need to say something, to clear the air, then do it. The second T-square between Pluto, Juno, Chiron, the Sun, Jupiter and Hygeia, it's a cardinal 25% aspect, right? So this is the dominant pattern, right? Quarter of the skies, intensity. Cardinal signs always wants us to take action, right? They demand it. So they operate within the field of tension, right? The power structures and habits that we've built, represented by Pluto and Juno in this T-square, are in direct opposition to your your emotional growth and healing, represented by the Sun, Jupiter and Hygeia in Cancer, right, with the wound around asserting yourself, putting yourself forward, Chiron in Aries at a pressure point, right, and it's all wanting to be released. So every time you try to restructure during this retrograde, the wound around speaking up, claiming space and asserting your right to exist will be activated. So take time with yourself. This doesn't mean don't speak up, but it just means that, be aware that, you may be scared to, you may, hide your voice, and watch out for hiding other people's voice. Allow other people to speak during this retrograde, right? We have a grand trine, as I said, between the moon in Sagittarius, Chiron in Aries, the south node in Leo. So this is a fire grand trine, bringing and adding to that passion, inspiration and creative energy that the quintiles are giving us, allowing us to flow without obstruction, our emotional truth represented by the moon in Sagittarius, and allowing our wounds to become wisdom, and our karmic past, which is represented by the south node, can work in natural harmony. So this fire trine says and allows us, to experience that our wounds have already given you the emotional motivation you need to move forward in your life. Sometimes we think they have to hold us back, but it's telling us that we've got the energy to move forward. And the grand trine between Saturn, Jupiter and Hygeia in Cancer, the midhaven in Scorpio, Neptune in Pisces, the water grand trine, right, adds to the emotional depth, intuitive knowing and spiritual connection, allowing them to flow together naturally, and our identity, our expansion, our growth, our health and our public career represented by the midhaven, and our dreams and spirituality represented by Neptune are all in this flow. So this is the trine that makes Saturn retrograde survivable, and more survivable if we're open to transformation. The water, holds us during this time. So if we allow it to cleanse us and let the emotions run and deal with them and not be scared of them, right? And then we've got a grand trine between Chiron, Vista, the south node and Black Moon Lilith. So this is the second fire trine when our wound and devotion, Vista, our karma and the side feminine, the rejected feminine, are all in fiery harmony. And this trine says your devotional practice, your wound and your inherited patterns and your suppressed worldliness are all aligned. So it gives us the energy to heal, the energies that we have repressed. In the same way we denied that energy, right? So it gives us the power to speak our truths, to transform, right? And to do what this Saturn retrograde wants us to do, to make the right habits and routines, to think about are the habits that we do actually ours or what we're told to do, and to close that gap, to be more authentic. Then we've got a yard between the moon in Sagittarius, Uranus in Taurus, the Sun, Jupiter and Hygeia in Cancer, the midhaven in Scorpio and Neptune in Pisces at 24%, right? So this finger of God, that's what the yard's called in astrology, is pointing at our emotional truth, right? And it says your emotional reality is under fated change right now. Both the sudden material disruption that Uranus in Taurus brings and the entire water grand trine of Cancer, Scorpio and Pisces are quincunxing to your moon, allowing you to sort of experience the tension with your emotions, but also change it, right? This is what this energy does to help you work with your emotions, not to numb yourself from it, because Saturn's in Pisces, it's not good here, it's in detriment, right? So, you may not set the boundaries that Saturn wants you to do because it's in Pisces. So it wants you and it's supporting you to be open to the emotions and to overcome them in terms of managing them and facing your emotional truth in a grounded way, in a productive way, right? Not in a self-destructive way. So this first stellium between the Sun, Jupiter, Hygeia in Cancer at 38%, three bodies, our core identity, the Sun, our need to grow, Jupiter, where Jupiter's exalted in Cancer, and our health instinct, Hygeia, are all concentrated in Cancer. So allowing us to have, allows our emotional home to be full of energy to help us work through any identity, growth and healing issues, right? Then the second stellium between Pluto, Juno and Ascendant in Capricorn at 38%, equally powerful, allows us to transform, to rethink our commitments and how we present ourselves, right? And Saturn it rules Capricorn, right, and Saturn retrograde in Pisces creates a direct feedback loop, asking us what are you willing to let go in Pisces, and showing us it's what we're transforming in Capricorn, because Saturn still rules Capricorn in this stellium, gives us the grounding that we need to change, right? So how this all connects is the dominance of the grand trines, 3 of them, 2 fire, 1 water, creating a foundation of ease and support beneath the tension of the T-squares. The water grand trine is the most significant for Saturn retrograde because it includes Neptune, the sign Saturn is retrograding through, because Neptune rules Pisces, and Saturn is being structurally reviewed, whilst Neptune provides the water trine that makes the letting go and the review more supportive rather than destructive. And this is crucial because the dissolving, the letting go of routines and habits during the retrograde isn't chaotic, right? It's held by water, by flow, and the 2 fire grand trines provide the inspirational energy, the passion and the creative motivation to rebuild what the water review dissolves, fire after water, clarity after cleansing, and the yard pointing at the moon adds urgency. Your emotional truth isn't optional, it's fated. The adjustment, the change pressure from Uranus, which always brings sudden material changes in our day-to-day life, right? Changes we can see, and the water trine, which brings spiritual integration. Both kind of, meet, combine on how we feel, wanting us to, integrate all sides of our personality and to really let go of things so we can be open to new beginnings, right? So now I'm going to talk about the Sabian symbols and what these degrees teach. So Saturn's in the 21st degrees of Pisces when it goes retrograde this year. So there's 3 figures. We've got a white lamb, a child and a Chinese servant. So the lamb represents innocence, sacrifice, the scapegoat, someone who takes blame for others. The child represents potential, purity, learning, the unformed self, we take things in as a child as we come into our soul awareness throughout our teenage years, adult years, and as we keep on learning. So the child represents the unformed self, the learning self, the self that's coming into awareness, and the servant represents devotion, service, cultural otherness, the ways that we say if you are this sexual orientation or this colour, you're less than and all of that. And also the servant represents the one who holds the household together whilst remaining unseen. So the core meaning of these imageries in the Sabian symbol is, 3 forms of vulnerability standing together, 3 beings who depend on the protection of something larger. The lamb doesn't protect itself, the child can't, the servant isn't permitted, allowed to. So together they represent everything in your life that is innocent, developing and serving without recognition. The parts of you that have been carrying the structure, doing the day-to-day things, looking after others, whatever it is you've been doing without being credited for it, the part of you that's been keeping you going despite your psychological and emotional and spiritual pain and other traumas, giving yourself credit for that. So Saturn retrograde in this symbol asks who or what have you been treating as the lamb, the child or servant in your own psyche, mind, higher consciousness life? Which part of you has been innocent and you've exploited it? Normally we neglect the inner child, right? The more vulnerable parts of ourselves. Which part has been developing and you've rushed it, not giving yourself the time to be and to get over things, allowing yourself to feel things instead of intellectualizing it. And which part has been serving tirelessly and you've never acknowledged that? So in terms of the Jungian depth, the 3 figures map onto the archetypes of the lamb, the sacrificial victim, and the child as a divine child the child as the divine child, potential selfhood, and the servant as the shadow of service, the part that serves others compulsively, often from an unexamined, unlooked into cultural family script or national script, saying, well, you must look after your parents, you must do this, and you must do that. Saturn retrograde brings all three into consciousness for you to reflect on, examine, and change. It's retrograde, it's reviewing the habits that you do and thinking, and seeing if they are actually healthy and worthwhile. So this part rules the left fibular muscle that stabilizes our lower leg without bearing the main weight. Just like the servant in this symbol, it holds the structure together without being the structure, and when Saturn retrograde activates this muscle, your body mirrors the question, what's been quietly holding you up that you've never noticed or thanked? Physical instability during Saturn retrograde points to the structure support that you've been taking for granted. So it's all about looking after your bones. Capricorn rules the bones, right? So Saturn rules the 10th house in Capricorn. So yeah. So bone health and looking after your overall well-being is important this retrograde, right? So Pluto has the Sabian symbology of pheasants displaying their brilliant colours on a vast lawn. So this is power dressed in beauty, displayed as dominance, the assertion of control through appearance. The pheasants aren't just existing, they're performing their magnificence on a vast manicured space that someone else maintains. So in terms of the connection to Saturn retrograde, Pluto also makes a quintile to Saturn, right, at 132 orb, and this is the transformer, Pluto and the builder in a creative conversation. The pheasants, Pluto's display of power, are being creatively restructured by Saturn retrograde. So the question is, your display of competence, authority, or success genuine, or are you a pheasant on someone else's lawn, And the body part, the left cerculite ligaments, the deep stabilizers inside the knee joint, you can't see them, but without them the knee collapses, right? So this is like power that's invisible but essential. So ask yourself, what invisible structures, routines, habits hold your authority together or take it away, and what habits do you need to bring into your life to empower yourself, right? Juno has the Sabian symbology of an albatross feeding from the hand of a sailor. So the grey ocean bell, the symbol of endurance, longevity, and material fidelity. The albatrosses, they mate for life, with their partners for life, accepting nourishment from a human hand, which is wildness, trusting the being domesticated, right, by the human, and the albatross is wild, untamable, choosing to be fed by the human hand. Juno represents committed partnership in astrology, and it is in quintile to Saturn at the time of retrograde at 057 orb, so this is extremely tight. So as I said earlier, your committed partnerships are in a creative genius level conversation with your structural day-to-day habit being reviewed. The albatross sailor image says, can the world oceanic part of your partnership accept what the practical deck swabbing part offers? Can the sailor, trust the albatross to return? Commitment during this retrograde is being creatively renegotiated. So, as I said earlier, there can be arguments in relationships, right? But the part with the quintile right to Juno is giving you that creativity to think out of the boxes and to bring solutions that are acceptable for everyone involved. The body part, this symbol rules, is the right cerculite ligaments, the other knees deep stabilizers, so both knees internal structures are activated, and Pluto in the left and no in the right knee, right? So your ability to kneel, to humble yourself, to be flexible, to propose, to surrender your standing position is the body's metaphor right now, and this is what this is allowing you to do, to, you know, be flexible and to bring newness into your life, to think about, to review what new habits you need to bring into your day-to-day life, especially when it comes to 10th house and the discipline to reach your goals. So the North Node has the Sabian symbology, a child born of an egg cell. So this is about emergence, giving birth, coming out, something new, breaking through a protective container, space that was necessary for development but is now too small. The child outgrows the egg, the soul outgrows the structure that incubated it, you know, the chick has to come out, the egg or whatever is in the egg has to come out. It was its home, then it outgrows the home. So we outgrow spaces, relationships, you know, and sometimes our physical place of birth as well. Old habits that we used to do, old addictions and stuff like that, you know, old communication patterns and every other pattern. So Saturn semi-squared the North Node during this retrograde is irritating. This creates friction between structure and our growth direction. The egg cell is the structure Saturn built, the child is the soul trying to come out, and Saturn retrograde asks, is this structure still incubating you, or is it now the cell you need to crack? And it rules the right symphysis veins, the long superficial veins running down the inside of the leg. So this is about circulation, flow, what's been circulating through your system that has now become stagnant. This is what you can ask, right? And the South Node has the Sabian symbology, the constellations in the sky, the 7th degree of Leo. So the cosmic pattern, the map written in light, what's eternal, unchanging, mythological, the stories humanity has projected onto the stars since the beginning of all now coming under the spotlight. So the connection to Saturn retrograde is Saturn is making a 60 square angle to the South Node, as I said. So our past life patterns, inherited karma and default comfort zones are in frustrated tension with Saturn's need for us to review our day-to-day habits, right? And the constellations represent the stories you have always told about who you are, where you belong and what your role is. So Saturn retrograde says these stories need updating. The stars haven't moved, but you have. So this rules the left coronary vein, the vessel that drains deoxygenated blood, used and deleted blood from the heart's waste removal system. So ask yourself, what has your heart been carrying that it needs to release? What emotional waste has accumulated? And, you know, so that you can, you know, get rid of the waste, start taking day-to-day actions to get rid of it, right? So in terms of your healing and growth and karmic patterns and lessons, I'm going to talk about this in a bit more depth now. So the soul work of Saturn retrograde in Pisces, you know, Saturn is karma. It activates the karma of spiritual authority, who gave you permission to teach, to lead, to structure other people's spiritual life, if that's what you've been doing. Who has taken away your permission? Who do you feel controls your spiritual religious life, and do they really have an authority? You know, are you willing to have that one-to-one relationship with whoever you call the higher power and give yourself that permission to, you know, form your own path, to take in religious teachings in your own way, you know? If people have been having power over your life, did they earn it or assume it? And why do you give your spiritual authority away, you know? So this isn't about external authority as such, you know, it's about giving yourself the permission to teach, to lead your own spiritual life. It's about the internal authority, the voice inside that says I know, versus the voice that says I'm learning still, you know. And at the deepest karmic level, Bhadrapada, that Sakra, the journey's end, combined with Saturn retrograde, suggests a life of root energy, not a near-death experience, but something like it psychologically. You're being asked to look back at the life you lived so far and honestly assess, what did I build that matters? What did I build that was just for fear management? What structure, routines, habits serve love and which ones serve control and fear, right, you know? So Pusan, the deity of Vavati, guides souls from one world to the next, as I said earlier. And Saturn retrograde here means something in your life is completing, ending, a chapter, a role, a version of yourself. You know, this is what should be happening during this year's Saturn retrograde. So like that moment in Normal People, the TV show, one Cornell finally starts performing academic confidence and admits to his therapist that he doesn't know who he is without the structures, routines, habits he inherited from his background. You know, the working class kid who built an entire identity around being smart enough to deserve his place. And Saturn retrograde, you know, dissolves the performance to reveal the person underneath. The karmic invitation is let the structures, routines, habits that no longer serve you dissolve, and trust that what remains is genuinely yours, not inherited and not performed, right? So as I said, Vavati is the final Natsakra in the Vedic system, representing the wealthy, the nourishing. Vavati is ruled by Mercury and governed by Pusan, the nurturer, nourisher god, guardian of the flocks, of the people, of the herds, of the animals, protector of travellers, and the guide of the afterlife, right? So this is the last lunar mason of the lunar zodiac. After Vavati, the cycle begins again at Aswini, Aries, right? So Saturn retrograde in its final Natsakra is the pausing at the very last stop before the train reaches the terminal, looking back at the entire journey and asking, what did I learn? What did I build? What's worth carrying into the next cycle? What needs to be left at the station? Vavati's symbol is the fish, or a pair of fish, you know, fish swimming in opposite directions. The same image as Pisces, right? Pisces is the two fishes. So this is completion, ending through return, going back, ending through circling back, looking back at, you know, the past, your past, so you can have a better future. The journey finishing where it started, but you're different now. Pusan as the deity adds a profound, deep layer. In Vedic tradition, Pusan is the god who ensures safe, you know, passage. He guides travellers and accomplishes guides, goes with souls from one world to the next. He is the guardian at the threshold. Saturn retrograde here means the cosmic disciplinarian has paused at this, you know, threshold, at this ending between worlds, and is checking whether you're ready to cross. Not punishing you for not being ready, checking, reviewing, ensuring you've packed what you need and left what you don't need, right? So Pada 2 of Vavati, where Saturn stations, has the Namvasa of Capricorn. Saturn's in its own sign, as I said, and this is Saturn arriving at its own doorstep at the end of the journey. The disciplinarian reviewing its own discipline in a nutshell. It's double Saturn, right? And the builder expecting its own buildings, and the authority questioning its own authority. So this Pada's meaning is structural completion, journeys ending. What foundations have you built? What daily habits? What do you need to do to create more stability in your life or continue the stability in your life? And Saturn retrograde in Vavati Pada 2 of the universe asking, have you built something that will outlast you? Do you want to do that? What is your legacy? What are you passionate about, you know? And in terms of a building, it's not a monument, not a statue or anything like that, you know. A foundation, habits, something that nourishes you, something that provides safe passage not only for yourself but for others. Think of it like the moment in Schitt's Creek when Johnny Rose, who lost everything material, realizes that the family structure he rebuilt from nothing, held together with love, vulnerability and genuine effort rather than money, is stronger than anything he had before. So Saturn retrograde in Vavati asks what remains when the external wealth dissolves, right? And the internal foundation is it strong enough to hold you, right? So in terms of the collective themes that we will experience during Saturn's retrograde, it will affect our collective relationship with habit, structure, authority, spirit, spirituality, between institutions and faith, and between discipline and compassion, right? So historically, Saturn retrograde in Pisces collectively corresponds to the health care system reviews that need doing periodically to make sure they're all right. You know, our prison systems and our reform in terms of our social housing and how we look after those weakest in society, right? And mental health crisis, infrastructure being tested and found wanting. You know, these are real things that are going on in our lives right now across our nations, you know, and religious institutions facing structural accountability, and the art sector dealing with funding and sustainability crisis. All these things are happening, right? So, you know, the entertainment industry, you know, particularly music, film and any other kind of medium that channels Pisces creative dissolution through Saturn structure faces restructuring. So we've got AI coming into how entertainment is made from music. We have AI music stars and all sorts now. So water infrastructure, specifically dams, floods, defences, water treatment, oceanic boundaries may face structural challenges during Saturn's retrograde in, you know, Pisces, which is a water sign. And again, we're seeing all of this happening, and across all collective themes, the underlying question remains: how do we build compassionate structures, routines and habits to sustain our individual life as humans and for the animals and for Earth itself, right? How do we create systems that serve the most vulnerable without, you know, sort of like making our compassion too rigid into, you know, bureaucracy, rigid rule following, or dissolving structure into chaos? Because we do need some kind of structure. Can't just go with the flow. It's Pisces likes the flow, so Saturn in Pisces brings discipline to the flow, to the emotions, to the chaos, right? To the unknown. So in terms of how it shows up in real life, you know, in our day-to-day life, in terms of our money, resources and security, Saturn retrograde demands us to renew our finances, right? Not just checking the numbers, but questioning the entire structure of how you earn, save and spend, right? And, you know, it wants you to ask, are you in the right job for the right reasons? Is your financial plan based on genuine security or anxiety management? So with the Capricorn stellium, you know, Pluto, Juno and Ascendant, all in Capricorn, right? Power dynamics and said finances are especially activated. Saturn in Pisces specifically flags charitable giving. Are you giving from abundance or guilt? Financial boundaries that have dissolved, lending money you can't afford to lose, and income from creative, spiritual or healing work that needs restructuring to be more sustainable and long term, right? So, you know, in terms of society, our career and public life, you know, if you've been climbing a ladder, the retrograde asks whether it's leaning against the right wall. Professional structures, routines and habits that looked solid and reliable may reveal foundational issues now. And with the water grand trine, you know, with Sun, Jupiter and Hygiene in Cancer, Midhaven in Scorpio, Neptune in Pisces at 37% orb tightness, your career, your public image and your spiritual identity are flowing together, and the trine 120% angle creating natural ease and flow means this isn't friction, it's integration, right? So in terms of your inner world, the work is real, you know. Saturn in Pisces creates what therapists call a structural vulnerability, the defensive structures, routines and habits you've built to manage your emotional, psychological and spiritual worlds become temporarily permeable. The boundaries let feelings through that were previously blocked and numbed out, maybe through, you know, addictive substances, you numbing yourself, right? So remember, this isn't a breakdown. Your inner authority, the voice that says you can handle this, gets tested, not destroyed. And with Neptune retrograde also in Pisces, the spiritual and structural dimensions of your inner world are both under review at the same time. So you might experience this as confusion but it's actually clarity through dissolution, through letting go. The old structure has to soften before the new one can form, right? So, in terms of your holistic toolkit, what to actually do. Take one day at the start of the retrograde to list every major structure in your life: job, relationship, home, financial plan, daily routine, spiritual practice and health regimen. Rate each for 1 to 10 for genuine purpose, not obligation, not habit, not fear, but purpose. Leg and knee care, both circular ligaments and fibular muscles are activated during this retrograde, right? So, do a plan to look after your health, right? In terms of a journaling practice, you can do a weekly Saturn letter. Write a letter to the part of yourself that holds everything together, the responsible one, the disciplined one. In terms of working with the water energy of Saturn in Pisces, immerse yourself in water weekly, shower, baths, swimming, oceans if possible. The water doesn't dissolve your structure, but it helps to cleanse and kind of put a sort of imagery, symbolic imagery of the flow that is needed in your emotional life, and the discipline too. Review your boundaries. List your 5 most important boundaries in terms of from 1 to 5, and see how you can enforce them more. Notice every time you defer to external authority during this retrograde: a boss, a parent, a partner, a guru, an algorithm. Each deferral is a data point. Of course, sometimes we have to defer to authority at work and stuff, but in terms of deferring to authority and things, you need to be looking after yourself. Monitor your feelings, do personal development work or go to therapy. Review your structures to look after your psychological and emotional and spiritual health. Are there enough? What do you need to bring into your life, right? In terms of inner work questions, you can ask yourself these questions, right? These questions, Saturn energy is heavy, so these questions are heavy and they're meant to be. Sit with one per week. Let the weight of the question do the work. You can ask yourself, what structure in your life are you maintaining out of obligation rather than genuine purpose? What would happen if you let it dissolve, let go of it? Whose voice is your inner authority? Is it actually yours, or is it a parent, a partner, a teacher, a culture speaking through you? The lamb, the child and the servant, Saturn, Sabian symbol. Which of these roles do you play in your own psyche? Which ones need liberating? If you could quit one responsibility tomorrow, consequence free, which one would you drop? The answer is the answer, and go with it. What have you built that you're proud of? Not the achievements, that others admire and say, you're great for this, but the habits and routines, the things you only know about, the daily discipline nobody sees, or what daily discipline do you need to bring into your life so you can meet your goals? What are you afraid of that will happen if you stop being the responsible one? What version of yourself exists beneath the discipline? Pusan guides travelers from one world to the next. Where in your life are you confusing rigidity, the refusal to bend, with strength, the capacity to hold? What would flexibility look like in that area? If the structures, routines and habits in your life were a building, what would the surveyor's report say? Is the foundation solid? Is the waterproofing adequate? Are the habits that you've got in place to look after your emotional, spiritual, psychological health adequate? Are your load-bearing walls intact? Do you have the right daily habits to look after all aspects of your health, right? Where are the cracks? Saturn retrograde in Pisces asks, can you build something beautiful on water, not something permanent, something that moves with the current while also maintaining its shape? What would that look like in your actual life, right? So now I'm just going to talk about relationships and how Saturn retrograde can affect our relationships, right? So if you're in a committed relationship, as I said, it wants you to review the structure of your committed partnership, not the love that Venus brings, not the passion and what Mars brings, but the framework, the discipline that holds the love and passion, the Saturn energy. Are you equal in your responsibility in the division of work and labour in the relationship? Are the spoken and unspoken rules of your partnership still serving both of you? Juno quintiling Saturn, says the answer to your partnership structural issue is creative, not conventional, right? The albatross and the sailor symbol means the world dimension and the practical dimension of your relationships are ready to nourish each other, right? In terms of dating and new connections, Saturn retrograde is not the time to rush into commitment, but it's excellent for reviewing what you actually want in a partner versus what you've been settling for, the structures, the routines, the habits of your dating life, you know, the apps, and all of that, right? And the types that you go for, the patterns that show up in your relationships are all up for review. New connections that form during Saturn retrograde tend to have a karmic quality. They may feel fated, weighted, like, oh, this has to happen, it's karma, right? And because of this, they can be more meaningful. Trust that feeling, but don't rush the structure, don't rush the moving in or anything like that. Just go with the flow, get to know each other, right? In terms of friendships and casual connections, hookups, Saturn retrograde reveals which friendships are structurally sound and which ones rely on convenience, proximity, or mutual avoidance of deeper connection, right? The friends who show up when things are heavy, not fun heavy, but Saturn heavy, responsibility heavy, life heavy, those are your Saturn friends, right? And the ones that provide you with the support that you need. In terms of our family dynamics, you know, with the Cancer stellium and the Capricorn stellium, right? Our family's emotional needs and our structural professional obligations are in direct tension and need to be looked at, right, and managed, you know, so there can be arguments in our family. Just be gentle with each other, practice active listening, and take time out when need be. In terms of professional relationships, authority dynamics at work get revealed from the inside out. If you're a boss, you will question your management style. If you're an employee, you will question whether your role serves your development. And for singles and those who are self-partnered, right, if you're single, Saturn retrograde is powerful for building the internal structure of self-partnership, the discipline of treating yourself as someone worth committing to. Your relationship with yourself has a structure too, or should have one, right? So build it if you don't have it. Routines, boundaries, self-talk and daily habits of self-care are important. In terms of your life development across your world, in terms of your career, the career that's genuinely yours will feel heavy but meaningful during Saturn retrograde. The career you're in out of obligation, fear or inherited expectation will feel heavy and meaningless at the same time. The difference in texture tells you everything that you need to know. And I know it can be hard to, you know, sometimes we have to pay the bills, so we've got to do the career that we don't like, you know. Can't always do things that we like, but also think of a plan that can help you move towards, you know, the career that you want, you know. In terms of education and learning, structured study of unstructured subjects like meditation, retreats with schedules, creative writing with deadlines, and spiritual study with frameworks and routines, right, is what's needed. The paradox is the teaching method, you know, discipline applied to the undisciplined, you know, bringing discipline into the Pisces realm of spirituality and anything like that, you know, emotions, our psychological health. In terms of our home and environment, it activates our career structure, and the tension between our domestic life and professional life is at its peak right now. So physical structures, routines and habits in the home may need attention. Foundations, waterproofing and weight bearing walls may need attention, right, as I said earlier. In terms of looking after our body, our knees and lymphatic system are all activated during this retrograde, so looking after our bones, joints, ligaments and the skeleton framework that holds everything else up, so doing the right stretches and all of that. So if you have been ignoring your body maintenance, Saturn retrograde insists you intend to it and look after it, and it also flags any mental health, structure and routine habits that we need to look after as well. So now I'm just going to wrap up with the full retrograde timeline and telling you what to do through it and giving you the key takeaways, right? So Phase 1, the pre-shadow period from the 20th of April to the 26th of July 2026. Over these months, these 3 months, are habits that need testing begin showing early stress signs. So look back, if you're listening to this in 26th of July onwards, on the period from the 20th of April to the 26th of July 2026, what structures, routines were under stress, what do you need to change during the retrograde season. From the 26th of July to the 10th of December, it's the heaviest moment, right, as Saturn concentrates its energy at this single degree. At the very beginning, responsibilities can feel crushing and burdensome, like heavy, and time can feel frozen. The weight of everything you've built can sit on your chests, because this is the period of review. Every structure, commitment, boundary, and responsibility you've created since April gets tested by the submersion in Pisces waters during the retrograde period, right? As Saturn goes direct on the 10th of December, prepare to move forward and implement, put into action the things that you said you needed to start doing when you was looking at all your different life areas, right? What survived the water test is genuine foundations, so things that survive Saturn's retrograde, these are the things you need to start building on. From the 10th of December 2026 to the 15th of March 2027, it's time to start properly implementing all of these these habits into your day-to-day life with new understanding, right? So ultimately, the key takeaways to remember is that Saturn retrograde from the 26th of July begins a 137-day internal review of every structure, routine, habit you've built, every responsibility you carry, and every foundation you depend on. The Sabian symbol says it gently: a white little lamb and a child and a Chinese servant, 3 forms of vulnerable service standing together, asking you, which part of your psyche, your day-to-day life, personality has been the lamb, the innocent and exploited, which part has been the child, developing but rushed, which part has been the servant, tirelessly holding the structure, the day-to-day habits together without recognition. Saturn retrograde brings all 3 into consciousness, right? Bhadrapada Natsakra says it directly: this is the journey's end, the final Natsakra, the last stop before the cycle renews. Pusan, the guide of souls, protector of travellers, is asking whether you're ready to cross from this chapter to the next. And Bhadrapada says structurally, Saturn is in its own Anvasa within Vavati, means the builder is reviewing its own buildings at the end of the road. The foundation will outlast the journey. The double quintile pattern says it's, creatively, that, the solutions to your structural crises are not conventional. You need to think outside of the box. And the 3 grand trines says it supportively, that you are supported and the energy to rebuild is available, as you allow yourself to go into your emotional depths, into your spiritual flow, and to integrate your left brain and your right brain, your career and your spirituality, right? So by the time that Saturn retrogrades, Pluto and Neptune are already in retrograde, and Uranus joins them in September, and by October Venus and Mercury add to the count. This is the universe pressing a pause on the entire human project and saying, before you go forward, review what you've built. And the bottom line is that July to September 2026 is the initial submersion, where your habits enter the water. What's solid will feel heavy but stable. And September to November 2026 is the deepest review, with 4 outer planets retrograde. The collective slows to a core, and November to December 2026 is the integration approaches as the planets move out of retrograde and go direct, right? And the thing about Saturn retrograde that nobody tells you is that it's not about destruction, it's about discovering what has already, which is already strong, and everything else was just scaffolding, and scaffolding is supposed to come down once the building can stand on its own. So it's about letting go of the habits that no longer serve us, the defense mechanisms that are now our prisons, right? And were built out of fear, right? To remind ourselves that we can't schedule enlightenment, we can't treat our spiritual practice like a project, we have to treat it like a lifelong thing. We have to build something. Our emotional, psychological and spiritual health is going to be tested, and it's about embracing what needs to change and letting go with grace. So I'm Amani, your holistic astrological life coach, and this is my take on Saturn retrograde 2026. Take care and see you next time.